So in the face of the increasing popularity of EVs and rising sales, the torrent of anti-EV material continues to flow from the media, especially on some of the YouTube channels here. Now, you probably know about some of these channels, and one of them I'm going to feature today is from a British chap who lives in Australia. He's called MGUY Australia, and he seems very smart. I think he may have a degree in law as well as knowing a fair about engineering. He seems a very bright chap, and he's got 112,000 subscribers. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute. It's on YouTube. It says EVs are not the answer. The answer to what? Okay, well, we'll find out hopefully if we go and watch some of his stuff. And if you want to do that and have a bit of a laugh, be my guest. Now, for your further amusement, I should point out that MGUY also has his own line of merchandise that you can buy from him to show your anti-EV credentials, t-shirts and mugs with his special logo on. I mean, come on, it's great. It's great fun. This prolific author of YouTube videos has recently had something to say about the fact that Bosch have announced they're laying off 13,000 staff in Europe, and he goes on to talk about what an absolute disaster the European car industry is. So let's see what he's got to say about that.
Only the European car makers that are struggling in Europe at the moment with all the crazy uncertainty as to whether EV mandates are going ahead or not, or whether they're going to be forced to make battery cars or not. But it's the entire supply chain for the automotive industry that is struggling. And unless there's some certainty quickly that's applied to the European position, these supply chain, these suppliers, these parts suppliers are going to continue to struggle.
It's a very serious point, and you know, in some ways you got to agree with him, because legislative uncertainty is not what companies need. They need to know for certain. But it's interesting how he talks about, you know, car companies being forced into, you know, are they going to be forced into making EVs? You know, as if there's no sort of organic demand amongst the buying population at all. When you look at the actual numbers, that makes no sense. I mean, in 2019, when I bought my car, there were about, I mean, you could count on the fingers of both hands how many EV models there were available. Now there's, you know, 150, 160 different EV models to choose from in Europe. And again, if you look at the sales in 2019, when I bought my car, 225,000. Just checking this. I've got this information from Edmunds, by the way, so it's a pretty sort of reliable source. 225,000 EVs were sold in Europe in 2019, and last year 1.23 million, so about 5 times as many. So governments can't force people into buying things, and you know, governments can't force car companies into investing into a multitude of models, and with lots and lots of choice for the customer, varying prices, which we now see on the market. Anyway, let's see what he has to go on to say.
And continues to enforce a particular technology, battery electric vehicles, onto the auto market in Europe from a certain date, 2035, then existing legacy automakers are going to struggle, as are the supply chain, including...
Well, there he goes a little bit off piece there. He's off to 2035 now, and it's 2025 now today. So, I mean, look what's happened in the last 5 years in the EV market, as I've just pointed out, in terms of sales and availability of different models, customer choice. Who can say, you know, I'd struggle to work out what's going on in 5 years, let alone, you know, in 2030, let alone 2035. But anyway, he goes on about this, and once again, it's, you know, our EV is going to be forced upon us and all the rest of it, when, you know, it's still a developing market. Customers have got choice, and they're increasingly choosing EVs. And by the way, in the same time that in Europe, EV sales went from 250,000 to 1.25 million, petrol and diesel sales fell from 16 million in 2019 to just under 13 million last year. So yeah, it's only going one way, folks. Anyway, let him carry on.
See, automakers are going to struggle, as are the supply chain, including one of the most famous, which is Bosch. Germany's Bosch to cut 13,000 jobs at its auto parts business. Bosch will cut around 13,000 extra jobs at its auto parts business by 2030.
Really do have to take this into context, and fair to him, he does point out that this is only 3% of Bosch's global workforce. But you assume that he's a capitalist and a democrat. He's all about choice, and all the rest of it, and not having governments force things upon us. But let's really think about this for a second. Does any company have a sort of God-given right to exist? I mean, see Blockbuster Video for details, or Nokia phones. I mean, Blockbuster used to employ, I think I read somewhere, 93,000 people in the United States at one time when video rentals was a thing. It's not a thing anymore. And in the future, increasingly, spark plugs are not going to be a thing either. Neither are starter motors or exhaust systems. So, I'm sorry, folks, but, if Bosch's total business was making parts for internal combustion cars, they would soon be out of business. But actually, we know that's not the case. They make very good electric motors, and they make excellent ancillary equipment for electric vehicles. But, we're going through change, and with change comes this kind of thing, I'm afraid. Anyway, let's let him carry on again.
The engineering giant is seeking to claw back 2.5 billion with a B euro in losses as quickly as possible, as Europe's car industry remains in the doldrums. Yes, thanks to bad policy.
Ooh, love the way he stresses the word billion there. Bit of context again. Bosch Group turned over 91 billion euros in 2024 and actually made 3.1 billion of profit. So yeah, it's not so bad as it may seem, but obviously it's a company of many divisions. I mean, they make washing machines and stuff like that. So the car business is obviously a big chunk. But anyway, let's see what else he has to say.
The firm said it intends to begin discussions with affected employees immediately. Car makers are struggling with lackluster demand, elevated labour and energy costs. Oh, but renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy there is. And competition from cheaper Chinese models, as well as raised tariffs on US exports. These duties on cars and car parts are currently charged at 15% rate, down from a previously threatened rate of 27.5%. As pressure from the US hits margins, the transition to electric mobility is also complicating matters for car makers, as uncertainty looms over the EU's targets to reduce carbon emissions.
Well, what do you know? We live in a world of competition. You've got car makers from China now coming into our European market, horror of horrors, despite the fact that they're having some pretty heavy tariffs put on them. The European car industry's in the doldrums, he says. Well, why is that? Is that all the fault of EVs becoming now a choice for customers? Or is it that the European car industry has been caught napping by focusing all its R&D efforts in the past on internal combustion engines and not doing what the Chinese have done, which is, build a supply chain to make batteries and electric cars, learn how to do it really well, and make them at a cost which makes them competitive around the world in spite of tariffs. And the other thing he says about renewable energy, utter nonsense. Now, if you're in the business of producing renewable energy, you sell it onto the market at a price which is determined by your costs and also regulation. And obviously what we pay as customers at the end of all that has very little relation to do with, the cost of solar or the cost of wind or whatever. In fact, in the UK, I believe the final price that we pay is regulated by fossil fuel gas. Anyway, let him carry on.
Several European governments have also scaled back EV subsidies for consumers, hitting demand. It's just a perfect storm for the European car makers. They're being prevented from making the cars that people want, which are cool petrol cars like this BMW with a straight six.
I nearly fell off my chair when he said that car manufacturers are being prevented from making the cars that people want, like this cool BMW six-cylinder engine. I mean, come on. I mean, look, I have to admit, back in the early 2000s, I ran a BMW six-cylinder diesel, it was, for about 10 years. And yeah, they're very, very nice, but, you know, they cost a fortune to run. Personal experience. Very few people can afford to run them. And I mean, even BMW make a lot less of them than they used to. And in fact, they made less cars with six-cylinder engines than they made EVs last year. They made 550,000 EVs, which was 25% of their production. And that's continued to rise as a percentage of their total business now. But I mean, who is this guy saying that, you know, people want to buy these really cool six-cylinder cars? Well, you know, you're lucky, mate. Maybe you can afford one. But the vast majority of car buyers, who I assume must be a lot of your 112,000 subscribers, don't run a six-cylinder car, and they may aspire to run one, but they're never going to be able to afford to do it. Anyway, let's see what else this nonsense guy has to say.
And they're being forced to make battery electric milk floats that people don't want, all because European policy says that's what it should be. Completely flying in the face of demand and completely flying in the face of what the customers want. And the
Flying in the face of demand, he says. So while we're on that subject, let's just check the data, shall we? I'll just look at my book here. Now, according to Euronews.com, which I've cross-checked with several other sources, by the way, in the January to August 2025 period, EV sales in Europe were up 24.8%. Now, that doesn't include plug-in hybrids. None of this data includes plug-in hybrids. So EV, pure EV, market share in Europe so far this year, well, up to August anyway, 2025 is 15.8%. In the same period last year, it was 12.6%. So this is a massive, mature market, Europe, that typically sells anything between 15 and 17 million new cars every year. And we've gone from 12.6 to 15.8, and it continues to rise. Now, at a country level, in Germany, EV sales up 39.2% in those same 8 months. Italy up 28.9%. Spain, it's virtually doubled. The only market that's been really flat actually is France. Now, just getting back to what he said again, it just can't resist going into the insults. You know, they call us evangelists and they call the cars we drive milk floats, whereas in fact, you know, the vast majority of them could see his cool six-cylinder off in the rearview mirror. You know, no problem at all. But anyway, you know, this is just it's how he makes his money. So, you know, it's all good entertainment, I suppose.
Manufacturers are just sitting in the middle, waiting for the EU to make its mind up. It's absolutely scandalous. If they'd only allow there to be a gradual transition, which might allow other technologies to exist alongside battery EVs, like hybrids, like efficient combustion engines, clean combustion engines, like sustainable fuels or biofuels or whatever, then there could be a mix that would allow this transition to take place gradually. But no, they won't let that happen because they've picked a winner. They've picked EVs as the chosen technology, and they aren't going to go back on that decision. And this is putting the automakers in an invidious position. They just do not know what to do. They're not going to be able to beat the Chinese at producing cheap EVs, but they won't be able to continue selling what they do best, high quality luxury petrol and diesel cars. It's absolutely disastrous, and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
So there he goes. He's just about finished now. I'm not going to show any more of him after that. He's going on about, you know, all these technologies that we've been through many times before. You know, synthetic fuels and biofuels and clean combustion and I don't know. I mean, he never mentioned hydrogen, so I'll give him that because, you know, that is another red herring non-starter that's never going to happen. But, you know, it's like an addict sort of, you know, clinging to the combustion thing. but you know, and that, you know, we're making the wrong choice, we're being forced into it again. Well, again, as I showed in a previous video, governments don't legislate for one industry or another. You know, they didn't legislate for or against the motorbike industry when they made it you know, mandatory to wear motorcycle helmets in 1973, and they weren't legislating for or against the oil industry when they banned leaded petrol in you know, for sale in the late 80s. These things, you know, governments make legislation because they're trying to improve the environment we live in or the safety. And the fact is that everything that he mentioned there has an exhaust system. You know, you're going along the road, you're spewing out your muck that we all have to breathe, and in an EV there is no exhaust system. And you know, that's why they are the favoured technology. So anyway, I think that pretty much puts him to bed. You know, you know, nothing I say is going to change the people who follow him, but I think his kind of videos are going to be interesting historically in, you know, 10, 20 years time, and they'll very much be in the comedy section. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Until the next time.